Hey everybody, my name is Chris Engel. I'm the City Administrator with the City of Merriam, and I want to thank you for tuning in to educate yourself on our quarter-cent sales tax renewal. This is a critical issue in our community, and it's important that you educate yourself on this issue before you receive your mail-in ballot in early January. Thank you. So the first thing to really know about this quarter-cent sales tax, the main takeaway is that it's a renewal of an existing tax. It's not a new sales tax. This is a special sales tax. It can only be used to fund street, bridge, and drainage improvements throughout the City of Merriam. There's a current quarter-cent sales tax that was most recently renewed in 2010 by 75% of the voters, but it's actually been in place since 2000. And voters will have the opportunity to decide whether or not to renew this special sales tax on January 28th by mail-in ballot. This is how the city's funded infrastructure for the last 20 years. There has been a quarter-cent sales tax in effect since 2000. It was renewed in 2005, and it was renewed again in 2010 for 10 years, expiring on 12/31 of 2020, which is why we're talking about the renewal now. It's interesting to note that each time our residents have been confronted with the renewal of this sales tax, they've made the decision again and again to fund their infrastructure with the sales tax as opposed to property tax. One of the questions we're asked quite often is, how much is a quarter cent? So if you were to go to McDonald's and buy a couple Happy Meals, you're going to pay less than 3 cents on a $10 bill at McDonald's. If you were to go out to Chili's and spend $50, it's actually less than 13 cents. If you were to go out and really splurge and have a good evening out at Chili's, you would only pay a quarter on $100 bills. And if you were to go to Home Depot and buy, say, a lawnmower for $500, a quarter cent would be the equivalent of $1.25 tax. Now we're going to start to cover some of the projects that have been funded with the existing quarter-cent sales tax. Since 2011, the city has completed 22 projects with the current quarter-cent sales tax, and we have 8 more that are underway. As you can see by the map on the right, we've pretty much geographically distributed all of those projects across the city. Many of them are our major thoroughfares going east and west or north and south, as well as some smaller projects in some residential neighborhoods. Here's a complete list of the projects that have been funded with the current quarter-cent sales tax. You can see that none of these numbers have been rounded because transparency is the key. Because this was approved by the voters, it's a restricted fund and it has to be audited, so every single dollar has to be accounted for. So now we're going to just take a look at a couple of the individual project before and after pictures. This first example is the 55th Street drainage improvement looking west from Merriam Drive. In this particular project, we installed an underground concrete drainage channel and we added new curb and gutter. This next project is the 54th Street drainage improvement, and this is a really transformative project. As you can see in the picture on the left, there was no curb and gutter, and by the time the project was over, there was new curb and gutter, there was a mill and overlay, a sidewalk added, as well as decorative street poles. So not only did it improve the drainage and the functionality of the street, but it actually improved the aesthetic of the overall neighborhood. 75th Street from Antioch to East Frontage Road is one of our major thoroughfares, and as you can see when you compare the picture on the left to the picture on the right, that at the conclusion of this project we had new curb and gutter as well as a mill and overlay, and we were able to clean up the medians in between 75th Street also. I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about our next slide. Less visible but no less important is what occurs under our streets. As we all know, stormwater is very important in Merriam. Due to the age of many of our neighborhoods, when the homes were built, most of the drainage systems that were installed were corrugated metal pipe. Corrugated metal pipe has a life of about 50 or 60 years. The picture on the left is a good example of what happens when our corrugated metal pipe systems start to rust. The water no longer channels from point A to point B as intended and actually starts to undermine the system. At that point in time, we have no longer controlled the water, and the water goes to the point of easiest entry and sometimes creates issues in our streets and our neighborhoods. We've replaced quite a bit of the corrugated metal pipe throughout the community, but we still have quite a bit to go. This last project is the FARLEY Avenue reconstruction, which is probably the most transformative project that we've completed the last several years. As you can see by the picture on the left, this used to be an old farm road that had not substantially changed for many years. Unfortunately, that road had deteriorated to the point where it was no longer safe to be a 2-lane road, so it was transformed into a 1-lane road for several years while we did engineering. And then as you can see from the picture on the right, at the conclusion of the project, we had added a new street surface, new curb, gutter, sidewalk, a retaining wall, new backyard fence for the neighbors, as well as new lights. Not only did we increase the functionality of the street, but we also made it safer for cars and pedestrians alike. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the uniqueness of Merriam. When I talk about the uniqueness, I'm talking about the financial uniqueness of Merriam, namely the pull factor. In Merriam, for every sales tax dollar we collect, about 80 cents comes from people outside of our community. What that means is over the last 10 years, this quarter-cent sales tax has generated $17.3 million total. However, due to this pull factor, only $3.5 million has actually come from Merriam residents. What's really exciting is that due to the predictability of this funding source, we've been able to leverage that money against additional sources to turn that $17.3 million into a total of $37.6 million worth of projects, all for $3.5 million of Merriam tax dollars. So when we talk about maintaining our community, that is the Merriam way. And if voters renew the quarter-cent sales tax in January 2020, more than $20 million in planned projects are eligible for funding between 2021 and 2030. Potential projects include Merriam Drive south of Johnson Drive, Carter Avenue, nearly 52,000 linear feet of storm drain that are rated poor to fair, continued maintenance on roads, residential streetlights, sidewalks, and drainage projects. Each year, the City Council will determine which projects get funded during the budget process. Another question we're often asked is what happens if the sales tax isn't renewed? Well, if the sales tax isn't renewed, the city's going to lose an average of $1.7 million in revenue each year that goes towards our infrastructure. If that occurs, tough choices are going to have to be made. That's either going to result in a decrease in service levels, we're going to have some budget cuts, or we may even have to have a property tax increase. The reality is that our operating budget in 2019 is $14.1 million. If we lose $1.7 million, that's over 12% of our budget. That money's not just laying around. We will have to make some tough choices. As previously mentioned, this is a renewal of an existing quarter-cent sales tax, so the language is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the date. The expiration date of December 31st, 2020 has been changed to December 31st of 2030. In summary, this is a renewal. It's a special sales tax that can only be used to fund street, bridge, and drainage improvements in Merriam. It's a quarter-cent sales tax, and it'll begin on January 1st, 2021 and expire on December 31st, 2030. And if approved, the sales tax rate in Merriam would remain the same at 9.475%. The city invests in capital improvements to keep infrastructure strong, streets clear, and residents safe. This sales tax renewal will continue to fund critical projects that are core to the city's basic infrastructure. Now that you're informed, let's talk about how you vote. The last day to register to receive your ballot automatically is December 30th. The last day you can register is January 7th of 2020. Ballots will be mailed on January 8th, and ballots are due to the election office by noon on January 28th, 2020. You can visit jocoelection.org/registration to register to vote. Thanks again for tuning in to learn about this critical issue for our community. To learn more, please visit www.merriam.org/maintaining Merriam.